Hi, Chris McClure here with Fire Apparatus and Emergency Equipment. Welcome to this episode of TIC Talk. Again, my guest is Manfred Kihn, and we are going to be talking about overhaul today. We're going to be talking about how to use your thermal imager during overhaul. It's somewhat nuanced. We're not looking exactly for the same stuff that we're looking for during a firefight. Let's start there, Manfred. When you're using a thermal imager for overhaul, talk a bit about what it is you're looking for and how that might represent itself differently on the thermal imager.
Hey, Chris. Okay, first of all, let's talk about the definition of what overhaul is, so everybody's in everybody's mind. So basically, operations conducted once the main body of the fire has been extinguished consists of searching for and extinguishing hidden or remaining fire, placing the building and its contents in a safe condition, and determining the cause of the fire and recognizing and preserving evidence or arson. So now, so we got to look at it today. The fire rolls in. We arrive on scene. We do our business. We get in there, initial attack. Obviously, rescue any victims, knock the fire down. But in a thought process, as a firefighter, do we at that time think about, hey, how did the fire start? Where did the fire start? We've got a job to do. We get in and we knock the fire down. Fast forward, fire's been extinguished. Now there's that messy, dirty job where we need to dig in to ensure that it is 100% extinguished. There's a word in the fire service we hate to use called, rekindle. And that's when the thing happens to light back up on us again after we've left the scene. And, again, major embarrassment. All fingers are pointed towards, hey, you said the fire was out. Obviously the homeowner, insurance company are going to be involved. Overhaul is the big job, is to ensure that, we've extinguished the fire. And then with use of the thermal imager is to get in there and look for those remaining hot spots that are hidden, perhaps smoldering, that are, with a few degrees difference, and, the material is cooling down. But in essence, it's called due diligence. We as a fire department utilizing our thermal imager to ensure that the fire is 100% extinguished. And that's where we're going to use the imager at this point.
Now, generally, how does a thermal imager help during overhaul?
Well, obviously the imager detects heat, right? And your three basic colors: white is hot, black is cold, everything in between is shades of gray. And then your imager will produce, obviously, high heat colorization, depending on the manufacturer, 300 or 500 degrees, where you get into some yellow, oranges, and reds. But for the most part, fire's knocked down. We may have some little embers here and there, so we're in the black and white grayscale. So anything shows up as white, is hot, must be investigated. Now, we go back to the NFPA 1801, where they've removed the digital number out of the display screen in the basic mode, but allowing it to come back in on the basic mode, because we say no thermal imager on the market is a thermometer. Well, this is where that digital number comes into play now, because as you're, in the little display screen, in the center box is a little green box there. That's your temperature focal point. As you're scanning around with the imager, and all of a sudden you see that digital number increasing, in certain areas, obviously I would consider those to be clues that you would need to investigate as a firefighter, to dig in a little bit deeper to investigate why we have advancing temperatures at that point in time. So we open it up, get our halogen bars in there, whatever, take a look around, and, we got ourselves a little smoldering hot spot, little squirt of water. Hey, we were successful. So that's where we're going to get into that part with the imager.
You just mentioned that the thermometer component of, for lack of a better term, of the thermal imager. Are there other features of a thermal imager that are particularly suited for use during overhaul?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Manufacturers have what we call the user selectable mode. I'm gonna mention Bullard. We have the electronic thermal throttle that basically paints a picture of blue, indicating an object between something that's warm, warmer, and warmest. So I could have three white objects. I activate the thermal throttle. I've got two white objects and one blue object, indicating to me that this is the warmest area of concern. Another feature would be the a hot area detector, where you get a little red box that moves around, obviously zips around to the warmest area. So you've got those two, as well as your temperature measurement on the imager. So those are some of the user selectable components that you can use on an imager. And obviously other manufacturers have got some user selectable components as well too, where you want to flip through and, find and isolate those areas of concern with that particular user component.
We've talked a number of times. You and I have talked about it. You've written about it in previous episodes of TIC Talk. We've discussed it. We've discussed training
Yes.
With the thermal imager. Now, obviously, training for overhaul with a thermal imager might be a little bit more difficult to do, just because it's a difficult thing to replicate. Do you have any suggestions for how fire departments might train with a thermal imager for overhaul?
Yeah, Chris, I'm just going to share a story with you. I received a call from a deputy chief one day. Said, "Hey, Manfred, can you use a thermal imager on overhaul?" And I said, "Why, Bruce, as a matter of fact, you can. That's what it's designed to do." And he says, I really need you to come in to give a class to some of the members of my department." And I said, "Okay." So I arrived at the department, and I get to the training division, and there's a room full of firefighters, and there's 4 individuals right in the very front row. And they're kind of sheepish looking, and their heads are down. And I said, "All right, what did you guys do?" And he says, "Well, we took every piece of drywall out of the fire room." And I said, "Really?" I said, that must have been a lot of work." "Oh, yeah. We worked at it for quite some time." I said, "So you went in there, knocked the fire down?" "Yep." "And then you took every piece of drywall out?" "Yep." "Where was the thermal imager?" "Oh, it sat in the apparatus." That's why you guys are here. All right. So training. Let's talk about training. Yes. Generally, departments have burn buildings, and we go in and we do live fire training. And again, it's easy for you to be able to go in there, knock it down, give it some time, and then go in there and investigate where the warm areas are as practice. You can't expect the firefighter just to pick up the imager and get in there, and if he's never been trained for it, because then let's get back into it. Fire cause determination. Okay, again, getting in when you arrive on scene, you find out from the homeowner that the fire started in the back bedroom. So get in there, and as you're extinguishing the fire, you're also at that point in time trying to preserve any evidence. If possible, if you take all the contents that are in this room and dump it out in the front yard, where's your preservation of evidence? Everything's sitting in the front yard now, so the fire investigation comes in, and there's zero evidence left. So, it's hard for them to determine the cause or the location of the fire at that point in time. So again, being cognizant in that part of training, you can set up burn rooms, and there are departments, and obviously there are courses that you can take for arson investigation that are special burn rooms that have furniture, and then you can have one team that will go in and set the room up and ignite it. The other team goes in there and extinguishes it, and now you have to come in and do your fire and investigation course, right, and determine the cause of the fire, the point of origin, perhaps if it was an arsenic or if it was an arson case, were there any trailers? Was there gasoline poured on the floor? Things like that. So there's parts of training that you can do, but generally any burn building that a department has that, has Class A fire capabilities, they can use that for overhaul training as well.
Are there mistakes? You get out all the time. You're training constantly with many different departments. Are there mistakes firefighters make in interpreting what they see on the thermal imager screen? Like in the beginning of this, you mentioned, if it's white, it's hot and it should be investigated. But are there mistakes that firefighters make when in how they interpret what they're seeing on the screen, specifically during overhaul?
Chris, for sure. Number one, not taking their time. That's the analytical part of thermal imaging, is understanding what it is that you're seeing in that interpretation, but getting in there and scanning too quickly, just the assumption, "Oh yeah, it's good. This is good. This is good. This is good," without just taking the few seconds and go back and scanning it. If your imager has record capabilities, which is even better for due diligence because it would be date and time stamped, but then you can take that video and then, maybe give it some time, take a look at it, come back in once again, reassess the building or the room in question, And before you would leave, do a final walkthrough and video. You go back to the firehouse, geez, Cap, there's just something about that fire that just bothers me. Let me take a look at that video again. Okay, well, here it's time stamped at this time. Let's go back to the structure, take a look at it again and go, you know what? I was right. There was something there that we missed. It's taking your time and exercising the due diligence. Today, insurance companies know fire services use thermal imagers. They know what they're for, and they know the benefit of using that thermal imager. And there's nothing worse than a department having to come back the second time. We call it a second fire. We don't want to admit guilt that it was a rekindle, or it's another fire or financial combustion, perhaps. But the big thing is that, insurance companies know that fact that you use thermal imagers. And if they come back again second time, it's like, question why? What did you guys miss? Oh, no. You know what? We extinguished that fire 100%. We guarantee that fire was out. Here's the video. We've got it. Date and timestamp. So now they need to look at what else could have happened. Perhaps the department got there too quickly, knocked the fire down, and the homeowner, and maybe it's an insurance job, the business owner is failing in his business, and he wants to collect some insurance money, so he sneaks back in and reignites the fire afterwards. So it's not a rekindle. It happens to be actually a second fire. So again, those are the things, but firefighters need to take their time and exercise prudence and due diligence when they're going through that final little walkthrough. And if in doubt, let's check it out.
You just mentioned a critical thing here, taking your time, doing the due diligence. Are there other aspects of a disciplined approach to overhaul using the thermal imager that you can touch on, that maybe go beyond a little bit about the just slowing down and taking your time?
Okay, so we refer to as a thermal imager. It's a tool, and it's a very, very valuable tool. But within the tool are tools itself. So black and white grayscale is a tool. Colorization is a tool. The temperature measurement is a tool. Your user selectable modes are tools within that screen. So again, when you turn that imager on, there are certain tools within that tool. So again, obviously you're going to go in the basic mode, black and white grayscale. If you go from basic to basic plus mode, if you have an NFPA certified thermal imager, now boots up and it gives you the user selectable modes. And then again, you're looking at your digital number and you go through the thermal throttle. I mean, you want to exercise every component within that imager. Now, unfortunately, if you happen to have an older imager that doesn't have, additional features, then again, prudence would say you have your black and white grayscale, you have your digital temperature measurement, and if you happen to exceed above a temperature set at 300 or 500 degrees, then you would get into some yellow, orange, and red at that point in time. But you want to exercise everything you can within that screen or within the imager's capabilities before you conclude to say, hey, captain or chief or battalion chief or whatever, hey, the fire's extinguished. Are you sure? Hey, let's do one last walk around. And a second opinion, hand the imager off to someone else. Let them go through and take a second look at it just in case. You may have missed something. Second set of eyes catches it.
We've been talking about overhaul, and I default to being inside in the fire room, where we're going. Is there value in doing another 360 outside during overhaul to maybe see some things that they're not seeing on the inside?
100%. Before anything you do, before you leave the structure, it's like every room within the structure you investigate, an entire 360 outside from rooftop to basement crawl space area, all four sides. Again, it's just the final. Are you sure? Okay, let's go back in one last walkthrough again, just to be on the safe side. But yeah, you 100%. You want to inspect, again, upper levels, first floor, second floor, basement levels, whatever building you've got. Investigate it 100% before you conclude that the fire has been determined. It's out. And again, obviously, the preservation of evidence, you want to definitely tape that off or rope that off or, mark it so that when your fire marshal or whoever does your official investigation comes, that, obviously you've got any pictures and video of that, you can show them, again, preserving that evidence.
you talked a little bit ago, both, when we talked about the disciplined approach and even before that, where we talked about doing the due diligence and slowing down. Besides the fact that this isn't something that you want to do too quickly, what are some of the characteristics of the camera itself that make it critical to slow down? Specifically, what I'm thinking about is, sometimes it takes a second for the camera to catch up to where you are. So just talk a little bit about those characteristics of the thermal imager itself that make it critical to slow down in these instances.
Yeah, I mean, and you put up a good point there. Slow down. I mean, we've got two different types of thermal imagers on the market. Your situational awareness, which have a 9 to 15 hertz refresh rate, which means you do have to move fairly slowly due to the shutter speed, versus the advanced decision making that are anywhere from 25 to 60 hertz refresh rate. So again, depending on the age of your technology, the older the technology, the slower the refresh rate, the slower you must move, versus today, 60 hertz refresh rate, lot faster in processing the information. You can move fairly quickly. But again, the big thing is, how old is the technology you're using? And should you be using a situational awareness imager that has a very slow 9 to 15 hertz refresh rate to make that command decision to say, hey, fire's out? Where the advanced decision-making imager, that's what it's designed to do. As a chief officer, I don't think I'd want to have that responsibility or task one of my firefighters to do an overhaul with basically a situational awareness. That might be good for being able to find a hot spot here and there. Okay, that's fine. But to make that command decision, it had better be an advanced decision-making thermal imager, just to be on the safe side.
I know we're talking about overhaul here, and that's the specific topic, but this is something that you've touched on before in articles within fire apparatus and emergency equipment, and that is those two different types of thermal imagers. Would you kind of just brief overview of the two different types and some of the applications for them?
Yeah, okay. We'll go back to the situational awareness. Those are small, the small-handed seeks, the FLIR K1s, K2s, the MSA built into the regulator, the Scott built into the face piece. Those are all what we call a situational awareness imager. Very small display screen, slow refresh rate, low resolution, 160 by 120 resolution, versus the advanced decision making, where obviously 25 to 60 hertz, 3.5-inch display screens, transparent colorization, versus we go back to the situational awareness. They have a solid colorization, again, much slower refresh rate. And again, those are situational awareness imagers are again, situation. Where am I within the structure? I get disorientated from my crew. There's a door, there's a window for means of egress. Again, for a bailout, they're for my own protection. Could I use it if I rolled in on a motor vehicle accident and I want to see how many occupants were inside the vehicle? Sure, I can use it for that. But again, to size up, there's limitations. Again, the refresh rate moving fairly slowly. Again, when you're scanning with the imager, not realizing that you just missed something, or a victim as you scan too quickly and the imager didn't shutter in time, and there's little Billy laying in the corner. We scanned right past them, and it's like, I don't know. I couldn't live with myself if I made that kind of a mistake as a firefighter. Again, taking your time and that slow process. As firefighters, we don't move slowly. We move fairly quickly. We got a job to do. I mean, those flames are building. That fire's getting hotter. We got to get in there. But again, now we need to slow down. We don't operate that way. So there are differences between those two technologies.
So in sort of concluding here today, are there any general comments you'd like to make on using a thermal imager for overhaul, or if there was one takeaway you would like viewers and listeners today to walk away with, what would it be?
There's an application in the fire service for use for thermal imager on every call that you go on. I mean, and the big thing is like, the definition, like I said, on overhaul is placing the building and its contents in a safe condition, determining the cause of the fire, and recognizing and preserving evidence, or arson. And that's the big thing. That thermal imager is there, but it has been extinguished 100%. We don't have to worry about a rekindle. Again, due diligence protecting, the department, liability, negligence or anything like that. But nobody wants, to come home. It's an accidental fire. Turn these out little, it's an arsonist. You got an arsonist running around the neighborhood, or it was by accident. It was a faulty piece of electrical equipment in the bedroom. It was a lamp that shorted out. And unfortunately, we could have had a loss of life, or a person's lost all of their belongings. Insurance companies, I mean, regardless, you cannot replace all your lost mementos and things like that, or your cherished pieces of things that you've collected over the years, because it was an electrical cord. And, that's something, the department can, the fire department gets in, knocks a fire down and realizes, and again, preservation of, your water damage, water's dripping down from the ceiling, getting all kinds of tarps out and salvage tarps and protecting all, as much as you can to protect. It's devastating to a homeowner, regardless any kind of loss. So again, with the fire service, with the, overhaul, it's a dirty job. It's a very dirty job to dig in. It's especially if they get up into an attic area where there's insulation and in the walls, it's a messy job. It's got to be done. Someone's got to do it. Unfortunately, it's firefighters that have to do it. And, take your time and be diligent about it. And, don't damage any more material, and don't rip all the drywall out of a structure and leave your imager inside the apparatus. That's a bad thing to do.
Well, Manfred, my thanks to you for sitting down with me today to talk about this. For those who are interested in hearing what else Manfred has to say about thermal imaging, he has been our thermal imaging columnist for a number of years. So you can always go back to back issues of the magazine. They are all archived on our website. If you have any ideas or any potential topics that we haven't covered in TIC Talk yet that you'd like to see us cover, let me know. I'm at chris.mcclune@clarionevents.com. And of course, if you have any ideas for a podcast that we have not hit on yet, please let me go. Again, chris.mcclune@clarionevents.com. So again, Manfred, my thanks to you for sitting down with me to talk today. I hope you've enjoyed this episode of TIC Talk. Have a good one, everybody, and stay safe. Thanks again, Manfred.
Thanks a lot, Chris.